Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the Terrace Farmers Market becomes award nominated. Former BC United candidates call for a new leader for their party, and the Haitzik Nation votes on a written constitution.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on this Friday, February 7th, 2025. I'm Jaylene Matthews. We begin with our news local to the Northwest tonight. The City of Terrace had their planning staff and consultants walking throughout the downtown area yesterday and today. The group will be assessing both commercial and residential buildings in order to identify potential opportunities to increase residential housing. The city has said they are aware of the housing-related challenges many are facing, which is why they are also working to conduct a zoning and commercial demand analysis that should further enlighten discussions surrounding land policy changes that could possibly support downtown Terrace housing options. The Our Community Plan Update section of the city's website is home to more information. After all the nominations were officially in, the 2024 BC Farmers Market Awards could potentially end up giving serious recognition to a farmers market here in the north. The Skeena Valley Farmers Market has been nominated for the award that recognizes the large farmers market that had the greatest community impact in the entirety of the province and is running alongside the Duncan Farmers Market and the New West Farmers Market. The winner of that award, along with all the other ones, is set to be announced during what will be an online awards ceremony on Zoom that is set to be held on March 4th. The award winners are set to be evaluated and then chosen by a panel of BC Farmers Market collaborators. The Kitimat RCMP have posted their latest weekly report that went over events that happened during the first few days of February. One report said a person came to the police in person and said they'd been duped by a caller who was pretending to be their bank. The victim then ended up spending a sum of money on non-existent gift cards, and this case is being used as an example to be careful about giving out your banking information. And after throwing in the towel on the election, members of the BC United Party are asking Kevin Falcon to step down. Here's CTV's Robert Buffum.
It was Kevin Falcon's last public appearance, pulling the plug on his party's candidates, making way for the BC Conservatives, leaving BC United, the official opposition, suddenly gone, mere weeks before the election. Fast forward 5 months, former colleagues demand he resign as leader.
He has now become an impediment to our ability to have a true centrist voice in British Columbia. So he's got to go.
Kirkpatrick says the party needs to fundraise to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to candidates, volunteers, and vendors for advertising and office leases.
He's not the guy to do it. He's lost the confidence of the people in the party. He's lost the confidence of the membership of the party.
Some candidates, like Megan Brame, got their money back. Still, she had to pay to get signs and BC United paraphernalia like this carted away.
I think it was just the, salt in the wound that kind of drove me more nuts than anything.
Others are still waiting to get paid back for their ads and signs. Kevin Acton is out more than $10,000 and he's suing to be reimbursed.
After the party folded, we didn't really hear anything from anybody for a while, and then we heard that they were having trouble with finances.
Meanwhile, Kirkpatrick wants to reignite the former BC Liberal Party's fortunes under a new leader and provide a centre-right alternative to the BC Conservatives.
Things can change very quickly in politics, as we saw last year with the rise of the Conservative Party.
It's great to see people like Corinne and others that want to try to do the right thing and move the party forward. But it can't do any of that as long as Kevin's clinging on. And I think a lot of us are wondering why he's doing that.
The party tells CTV a leadership race to replace Falcon would have to take place within 28 days of him resigning, a costly venture with its 40,000 members, when its priority needs to be fundraising for its current debts, not incurring new ones.
Robert Buffum, CTV News.
Coming up next, the right and wrong ways to film killer whales. Thanks for staying with us. A proposed new constitution for a BC First Nation has trailblazing features. Here's CTV's Ben Miljor with that story.
For thousands of years, the Heiltsuk have called the lands and waters of BC's Central Coast home, and for most of that time relied on a hereditary system of governance.
All through that time, we developed laws which informed our governance, and that was stripped away by the Indian Act.
Canada imposed elected chiefs and councils on First Nations, diminishing the powers of hereditary chiefs. A proposed new Heiltsuk Nation constitution would codify a power-sharing agreement between elected leaders, hereditary chiefs, and the Women's Council.
We are looking back to move forward as the Heiltsuk, Indigenous place-based people, so we can take care of our future generations.
The inclusion of the Women's Council enshrines the importance of matriarchs, who have always been very influential in Heiltsuk society.
Women had a very strong role in overseeing the well-being, the health, the balance, the moral fabric of our society.
Some other First Nations in BC already have constitutions, with some of those being drawn up during modern treaty negotiations. The Heiltsuk have never signed a treaty, and its membership has told leaders they don't want one for their traditional unceded territory. The proposed constitution provides a framework for anyone who does enter into negotiations with the Heiltsuk, whether that involves industry or another level of government.
Anybody wanting, or if we're sitting down and having discussions around certain things important to our community, it will clearly identify our decision-making process and also who our leadership is.
Voting will take place over the next 2 weeks. If adopted, the new constitution will be ratified at a feast in Bella Bella this spring. Ben Miljor, CTV News, Vancouver.
Seeing a killer whale in the wild would be a once-in-a-lifetime treat for many. However, many also wouldn't know that there are rules that come into play when you see one of those majestic creatures. CTV's Shannon Patterson reports on the buffer zone for killer whales.
When a pod of orcas appeared in Ucluelet Harbor in January 2021, a local videographer captured the majestic scene.
As I was shooting the whales, the woman on the paddleboard started appearing in my shots, and I actually wasn't aware of her entering the water. I was focused down the lens of that camera the whole time.
The paddleboarder, Ucluelet resident Christy Jameson, stayed with the transient killer whales for about an hour, taking photos as they breached and swam around the harbor.
I wasn't necessarily thinking specifically in the moment about the encroachment on the whales. I was more thinking about her own safety.
There was enough individuals that knew to call the DFO Observe Record Report line, which is our violations reporting line.
It's a violation of the Federal Fisheries Act to be within 200 meters of orcas on the water, and an investigation determined this was no accident.
In this case, it was obvious that the pod of whales was in the harbor, and certainly there was evidence that Ms. Jameson grabbed her paddleboard, got in the water, and actually paddled up to the whales well within that 200 prohibited distance, in some cases getting as close as 50 meters.
On Tuesday, Jameson became the first paddleboarder in Canada to be convicted of being too close to orcas.
Originally, Crown was seeking $10,000, and they did land on a fine of $2,500.
Ucluelet is a small town, and the man who shot this video knows Jameson. He says she's been harassed online over what she did, and she's remorseful.
I'm sure that the fine is just a drop in the bucket compared to the emotional journey she's been on.
I think it's important to recognize that this intention is not to vilify this individual. I think rather looking at this as an opportunity.
An opportunity to remind the public that the 200-meter buffer zone for killer whales applies to all vessels, motorized and human-powered. Shannon Patterson, CTV News.
Turning to the weather, Arctic outflow warnings remain still in place for a few areas of the province, including the Whistler Valley and inland regions of the North Coast, where wind chill values could reach -20. But we will all see sunshine around the Northwest this weekend as clear skies and chilly temperatures are in the forecast. On the North Coast this evening, it's looking like a few clouds and light winds with a low of -6 and wind chill of -3 this evening and -12 overnight. Tonight in the Terrace area, expect clear skies becoming partly cloudy overnight, winds up to 15 kilometers an hour and a low of -13, with a wind chill of -11 this evening and -16 overnight. This evening in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, skies will be clear with a low of -23. For the next few days on the north coast, the sun will mostly stick around with maybe a few clouds here and there. The temperatures should sit just around above freezing over the weekend. In the Terrace area, we can also expect some sunshine this weekend and getting into next week, with colder temperatures sitting around the -7 range and overnight lows staying in the negative double digits. In the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, it's looking like a weekend of sunshine getting into next week, with temperatures sitting in the -10 range and overnight lows around -20. Checking out our highways around the Northwest now. On Highway 16, slippery sections in some areas and compact snow near Morristown. Slippery sections and compact snow on Highway 37 and 37A as well. On Highway 118, slippery sections, and on the Nishka Highway, slippery as well. For Telegraph Creek Road, slippery sections and compact snow from Telegraph Creek to Dease Lake. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, some unexpected merch that's popping up on Amazon. As the potential threat of tariffs loom, heads of local municipalities are working together on ways to manage a possible trade war. Here's CTV's Mike Lecouteur.
As the clock continues to tick down on the new tariff deadline, politicians at all levels are attempting to insulate their economies in case U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat. Behind the handshakes and camaraderie is concern over punishing tariffs. The Prime Minister huddled with the mayors of Canada's largest cities to make a plan for a possible trade war with the U.S. And Justin Trudeau wants them to leverage relationships across the border.
You are the ones who decide whether your lucrative procurement contract goes to a firm in Moose Jaw or Montana. You are the ones who put local diplomacy in action.
The mayors are already doing that type of work.
We can arm the Team Canada approach with real on-the-ground examples of how tariffs will hurt our local economy.
Even the threat of tariffs already is. Montreal-based ShearTex is laying off 40% of its staff because the tights manufacturer says additional costs could be too much to bear.
This could have massive tens of millions of dollar impact on our financial forecasts.
Mr. Greer, I would welcome you.
The tariff impact on American businesses was highlighted during the confirmation hearings for Donald Trump's new trade representative. However, Jamieson Greer brought it back to the border.
The action that the president is talking about is about fentanyl, where we don't want another single fentanyl death.
Keen to show work is being done, Mounties went public with 3 recent incidents where they intercepted migrants at the Canada-U.S. border. In an interview on CTV's Power Play, the RCMP commissioner said 35% more personnel have been moved to the border from other areas.
We have to be flexible as an organization, and this is not different for any law enforcement, to be able to redeploy resources to a priority with minimal impact on what we're doing.
The commissioner says it's a delicate balance, but he insists the shift in resources will not impact public safety in other areas. Mike Lecouteur, CTV News, Ottawa.
A BC-based coffee company is leading a national movement in the face of potential U.S. tariffs by inviting cafes to call the Americano a Canadiano instead. Kicking Horse Coffee says cafes can receive a Proudly Serving Canadians window display, a symbol of their participation in the patriotic movement. Chief Marketing Officer Lori Hatcher-Hillier says now more than ever, Canadians need to stick together and demonstrate pride in their country. Canadian pride is on the rise in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats. The U.S. President has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in his consistent cajoling and 51st state remarks. Now, CTV's Adrian Gobriel investigates the new merchandise that's popped up in support of the annexation of Canada.
From 51st state pins to bumper stickers, there's even a maple leaf covered by an eagle.
Dude, what? Why?
Type in the words 51st state into Amazon.ca and an array of apparel appearing to promote the annexation of Canada pops up for sale.
A lot of platforms kind of try to do less in terms of regulating what's on their platform. Good, bad, or ugly, they kind of let it just play out.
Amazon's offensive products policies in part states that items that promote, incite, or glorify hatred, violence, or organizations with such views will be removed. CTV News asked Amazon Canada if the 51st state merchandise met their offensive product threshold. In an email, they shared that none of the items breached their policies.
It's almost like a free speech play in a way.
That free speech is being sold at a price. Just how much of this merchandise is selling on Canadian soil remains unclear.
There might actually be some people in Canada who might buy this stuff. There are some people on social media who say, let's do it. Let's join.
Though we were hard-pressed to find any takers on the streets. Interested in buying a flag?
Not one of those, unfortunately. I don't think it would fit my aesthetic in my room.
Do you think that these items on Amazon are promoting the annexation of Canada?
Yes, 100%.
That said, retail analysts point out that right now there's an appetite for political merchandise, including items trumpeting Trump's ideas. In some cases, controversy sells.
The mining industry is applauding BC's decision to fast-track permits for projects as the province grapples with the threat of U.S. tariffs. But research suggests it has been economic factors behind long delays for many other proposals. Rosemary Collard, an associate professor at Simon Fraser University, says research shows that regulatory fast-tracking does not guarantee projects will materialize. Collard is the co-lead author of a recent study that looked at 27 BC mining projects granted environmental assessment certificates since 1995 and projected to open by 2022. Finding most failed to do so and 13 never opened at all. Of the 20 that failed to open on time, regulation was a factor in 3, while the study says economic factors and viability were the most common holdup. Turning to the markets now, Canada's main stock index moved lower Friday and U.S. stock markets fell after the latest job reports on both sides of the border. The Canadian dollar dropped very slightly. The price of gold rose $10.90. Oil rose by 39 cents. Natural gas dropped 10 cents. Aluminum rose $27.50. In Toronto, the TSX was down 91.58. The Venture Index was down 0.23. In New York, the Dow Jones was down 444 and the Nasdaq was down 269. Still ahead, the reliability of electric vehicles is put to the test. Next, Pat Foran from CTV News looked into what's going on behind the scenes at Canada Post.
Canada Post went on strike in mid-November and mail and parcel service came to a stop until workers were ordered back on the job December 17th. There was a huge backlog, and while the post office says it's getting back on track, many Canadians have noticed delays in receiving their mail. CTV News decided to conduct an experiment. Consumer Alert producer Farah Chandani wrote 6 letters to our friends and colleagues at CTV stations in Vancouver, Edmonton, Ottawa, Montreal, Halifax, and one to myself in Toronto.
It's Thursday, January the 9th, just after 10:30 in the morning, so let's see how long it takes these letters to get to where they're supposed to go.
CTV Halifax was the first to receive their letter in 7 days, along with CTV Ottawa, which also had it arrive in 1 week. Next was CTV Edmonton, which received their letter in 9 days. Even though my letter was mailed in the GTA, it took 12 days for me to receive it in Toronto. CTV Vancouver didn't receive their letter until 19 days later, and CTV Montreal is still waiting for theirs. They have yet to receive it. When CTV News reached out to Canada Post, a spokesperson said, "We thank Canadians for their patience and that while we've stabilized our operations and taken care of the parcels in our network, we continue to work through higher volumes of mail."
When you actually have to deal with the backlog of all of the mail that had accumulated, it probably takes a good month to 2 months before things get back to usual.
A professor of economics is not surprised Canada Post has been running behind with its deliveries. Moshe Lander says despite fewer Canadians using the Postal Service, it continues to struggle to deliver mail in a timely manner.
Canada Post is in terminal decline. There's no way around it. The volume is falling in a way that it's never going to come back. The end is near.
Canada Post says it's working to continue to restore normal operations, but if you're expecting something in the mail, it's not clear how long you'll have to wait to get it.
Here's CTV's Tyler Fleming, who put an electric vehicle to the test.
And we're off on an electric adventure like no other. We're going to drive this car until it's dead. But will this 2025 Kia EV6 make it to Mont-Tremblant first? New to electric vehicles, I'll trust the tech, 366-kilometer range. But travel buddy and EV guru Alan Downward is skeptical.
We're -10 out here today in Ottawa, so we're going to be around, I would say, 300 to 350 kilometers of range.
Cold weather can drain EV batteries fast. Heat, winter tires, and snowy roads add to the strain, often more than manufacturers admit.
Just a reminder to take your readings.
And we're not alone. CAA is testing 14 top-selling EVs in one of Canada's first big winter road trials. Drivers pushed each EV to its limit, tracking energy use, braking regeneration, and the impact of an Arctic temperature.
What we wanted to get to the root of was what it was like, to drive an EV until it got to zero, and how long would it take.
First stop, Grenville, Quebec. And we are at 59% battery. Smooth ride so far. Keys are in the car. From here, I co-pilot. Downward is from Plug and Drive, which accelerates EV awareness.
We're currently in a new wave of electric vehicles where the range is amazing.
But still remains a barrier for consumers.
It's 37% battery.
And while we doubt our 355-kilometer trip, this Polestar EV driver doesn't.
I had 400 kilometers when I started, and it's 51 and it says 200. So yeah, I mean, it's performing really well.
Also needed more charging stations.
Especially we're out in the middle of almost nowhere.
As we roll into our final stop about an hour drive east of Mont-Tremblant. We're at 8%, so we are definitely gonna need these guys right here. CAFU, an emerging mobile supercharging service.
In 2025, we plan to be active all across Canada.
But today, boosting is not allowed, so can we make the final 80 kilometers? We're really starting to lose speed now.
That's our news for now. Thanks for watching.